Hello, welcome back. In this episode, I talk with Sillypenta, a fellow brick filmer. I'll leave a link to his stuff in the description, so definitely go check it out. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you're new. Also, I'm doing a weekly mock contest over on my Discord server, so if you're interested, that'll be linked in the description as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoy episode 16 of the Nothin But Bricks podcast. Welcome to episode 16 of the Nothin But Bricks podcast. Today I'm joined by sillypenta. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I wonder if we're about to break the record for most Irish brick filmers on one podcast.
I hope so. So to start off, I guess we could just start off with the basic kind of questions. What got you into brick filming?
Well, what really got me into brick filming was when YouTube had been around for only a couple of years. Featured on the front page was an old brick film called Circle Circle Dot Dot, which I think was the most viewed brick film on YouTube in the early years. And that was by Blunty, who was one of the most influential brick filmers before YouTube and at the start of YouTube. And after I saw Circle Circle Dot Dot by him, I watched his other brick films, and shortly after that, he made a how to make brick films type of video. So that's kind of where I learned all the basics, and then I started trying it for myself. But I did have a couple of brief interactions with brick filming before that, which started from the Lego. Probably, I think the first brick film I ever saw would have been in the Lego Studios horror set, which came with a CD that had a few brick films on it. And at some point, I did, in making videos, just messing around with a camcorder. I did the whole start the video and stop it type of filmmaking. Mostly without animation, but maybe with like one or two shots of a vehicle very slowly driving. So I have a couple of early experiments, but mostly it's rooted in seeing Blunty's stuff in 2007.
Cool. Right. So would you have made those videos with your brother as well as because you make your videos now with your brother, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, I've always
Um,
made everything with
right.
my brother. Every brick film. We've always been, similar interests and enjoy making things. I think that making things collaboratively is more engaging, more interesting to actually be able to bounce ideas back and forth and feel like you know you're doing something that you're not just sitting alone by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. My sister and I are making a live action short film, but we're still writing the script at the moment. So it is like that kind of collaborative side to it is something that you can't really get when you're just doing it by yourself. So yeah,
Hmm.
definitely get what you're saying there.
And also, I think it probably helps with motivation as well. That you can't just put it off. Like if there's somebody else involved, then you're gonna end up talking about it and what you should be doing next and so on.
Yeah, yeah, and then because you both if you both get different ideas for what you want something to look like, you can like merge it into one ultra video.
Yeah, and also maybe sometimes I'd have an idea that's like not so good, and my brother would be able to say, yeah, maybe we won't use that.
So yeah, so you recently put out a new brick film, Taco Trouble 2. So what was it like kind of diving into something that was like written by someone so long ago?
Well, I think because it was the first thing I've made that I didn't actually write, I wanted to make sure that I would bring a lot of visual interest to it. That was my number one concern. Because previously I've always felt like I've kind of just been coasting along, just kind of making brick films without really upgrading much technology wise. I was pretty happy with some animation I'd done before, but other than that, I didn't really have much in the way of like standout cinematography or lighting, etc. Or even not just um not just technical aspects such as that, but like the visual language of film. Uh, I didn't really put much thought into that, into how the shots should, how things should play within the shots. Like where the characters should be in a shot and how they should enter or exit the frame, or what would play the best for what comes next after the previous shot. Previously, you just kind of point and shoot, like what's happening next. Okay, we'll look at it, and now it's done. So I wanted to make sure the film had my own sort of that I was bringing something to it, not just making someone else's film, essentially.
Cool. So, how much of the original script was changed then for like remaking it in a modern kind of way?
Pretty much nothing was changed. I want to say a couple of things were added. So, like, very, very little was actually removed or altered to be able to add a couple of things. Like, obviously, the part at the end where they're sort of referring to President Trump is new, and that kind of added some context to stuff they said earlier, which I thought worked well. At first, I kind of said like, "Oh, let's not change it at all. Let's just make it like as it was in 2003." Because obviously, I'm like the history guy, so I'd be inclined to say things like that. But I think at the end of the day, giving that new context, adding that new depth to the joke, made it a lot better. But other than that, there's like very occasionally something like when Jingles says, "Now who smells Mr. Feedback?" That was a new line. Which again, that kind of ties it back to something Biff said, so it makes it a more sort of complete whole joke rather than just he randomly starts throwing crap and that's it. So just very, very small additions like that.
Cool. Yeah. So, how did it feel to finally like release this thing that other people like were trying to make years ago?
Well, I think a lot of brick farmers can relate to when you have a major project in development for years, and you know once you release it, it kind of feels like you don't even know what to do next at all. In general, it, in a way, it's almost nice to have this project hanging over you that seems like it'll never end because you always have something to do, something to be working on, and you can feel productive if you're actually working on it. So I guess that was the main feeling. I was actually kind of surprised by feeling that I wanted to make another brick film eventually. At first, I kind of expected that I'd hardly want to. Um, but I mean, as far as like it being a film in a series that was, there was never really actually much of an intention for them to make it years ago. I don't think. Initially, they said that they probably wouldn't film it because it didn't have action, which that kind of inspired me as well. The fact that they said that back then, that's why I wanted to bring the sort of, my thinking was I must bring the action through the visuals, if that makes sense. So like that's why I wanted to make sure the visuals were really nice, and the way the film flowed worked well. I wanted to make it like sort of prove that it had a reason to exist as a film, not just as a script. So I think being able to release it felt really good that like people actually responded to it really well. I think I succeeded in what I was setting out to do.
I would say so. Yeah. Um, yeah. Cool. So yeah, I'd recommend anyone listening to go check the video out. But so moving on to another thing I wanted to ask was how did you like start the Benny and Lee series like in the first place?
Well, but when I started brick filming, pretty much every single newcomer, especially if they were young, made up their own dynamic duo because at the time we were all influenced by Blunty, who had the older Steve and Dave films from 2002 and later, and they were really influential on Benny and Lee. Particularly if you look at it in Steve and Dave, there's a third character called Bob who's like very strange. So that sort of highly influenced the Skelly and Benny and Lee. But apart from that, like because Blunty's films had been influential before YouTube, you know, many of the brick filmers on brickfilms.com at the time before YouTube also took influence from Steve and Dave, and also another film called Out of Time, and they made their own duos. So like Mind Game had Ben and Andy, and Nathan Wales had Alex and Derek, and there was many more than that. So like by the time all of these films were getting uploaded to YouTube in about 2007, if you were a newcomer, you just suddenly see this massive flood of dynamic duos. So it just kind of seemed like the thing to do. Like everyone just made their own duo without even thinking about it. A lot of people's earliest films would just be called like, X and Y trailer or intro, even if they didn't have an actual episode to show. So Vinny and Lee was just one of those. It was just another two guys to add to the pile, but it managed to just stick around. Well, I think a couple of people on brickfilms.com actually took to it pretty early. I think they thought it was a bit stranger than most of the average duos, so they liked it. So then, because of getting some actual positive reception, I guess we just kept going with it, and I managed to just hang around for years.
Right. So when making the set for the Benny and Lee videos, was the stain on their wall intentional, or did that gradually kind of build up over time?
Well, the set originated as like literally the first ever set that I built for the first animation test that I did in 2007. So there wasn't any thought put into it. It didn't take long to build. It's obviously terrible, and but no, it didn't have the stain originally. The stain emerged in Benny and Lee Valentine's Day special, where at the end a character is killed with plenty of sauce, blood, which in a way is, I guess, you could almost say it's reminiscent of Taco Trouble, the original, where it's like meant to shock the viewer a bit in that suddenly there's somebody getting murdered with loads of blood flying everywhere.
Cool. And I think I saw a Benny and Lee video where they were like trying to figure out what happened with the stain, or like the story behind it in their own universe or something.
Well, yeah, I guess in Benny and Lee sticky situation, they kind of talk about it as if they don't even remember how it got there. I do kind of like the idea of not specifically referencing older installments so that newcomers can enjoy the film still. Like let's say I did World of Warcraft 2, which was the sequel to a 10-year-old Benny and Lee at the time, but it didn't like continue on from the events of the original World of Warcraft. It was just another episode about an online game, and everything else was new. I mean, there's a brief cameo from the nerd character from the original World of Warcraft, but other than that, like you don't have to have seen the original. So I like to do that. So for that reason, if they talk about the stain, they don't exactly go into the deep lore of it. They're just like, there's a weird stain on our wall. That's weird.
Cool, yeah. So for like the whole series, would you then prefer not to have like much continuity in like the episodes that come after each other? Or...
I like a bit of continuity, mostly just as a sight gag. Like, let's say in the most recent brief one I did for Brawl last year, their house is still destroyed because it was destroyed at the end of the previous one. But like, the episode isn't about their house being destroyed. It just so happens to be destroyed because it was last time. Uh, but I don't like the idea of like one continuous storyline that just keeps going and going and going from one episode to the next to the next to the next. I think it's more like a classic cartoon or sitcom where I guess more like a cartoon where it ends and anything could happen in the next one. Like if somebody's killed, like let's say the robber is usually killed, he can just be back in the next episode still alive, and it doesn't need to be explained how he got back to life or anything. That's what I like to do.
Yeah, cool. Because then that also opens like more doors of like if you have a completely different idea that is completely different to the last one, then you can just do it because there isn't like a big continuity kind of commitment thing there.
Yeah. I remember when South Park started doing seasons that had a storyline that continued through the entire season. And like, it seemed cool the first time, but then once they started doing it every single season, it felt like they were just repeating the same jokes over and over again. And also it kind of felt like they're being bogged down by having to keep this one storyline going. And if it was kind of getting stupid, then they just had to stick with it, and so it basically ruined the second half of the season if it was going nowhere really. So I'm kind of wary of things like that.
So then, would you prefer to, this is kind of unrelated, but would you prefer to like work on a project like the Taco Trouble 2 video where it like takes a really long time, or do you prefer to do the kind of shorter like videos that take only a few weeks or so?
I do feel like I'm kind of both at the same time. Like, I do like to make the long projects that are impressive, or well, I mean, the only really impressive one I've done so far is Taco Travel 2, I'd say. But yeah, I liked them with Taco Travel 2. I liked that people were, anticipating it, and when I released it, like we did the live screening. So I don't like that now in Rick filming. There's so many films that like people can release stuff and it's barely a blip. I felt like many years ago you could put anything in the post and review section of the forum, and you'd get replies. It didn't even matter if it was bad or small. Like people would actually watch it and reply to it. Whereas nowadays there's so much that it feels like you're not making an impact. I think it's very hard to feel like you're making an impact. So I think with major projects that you've put a lot of effort into, like people start to pick up on it over time and they start anticipating it, and it's like, I wouldn't ever try to generate hype, but if hype starts to build by itself, which I think it did for Taco Trouble 2, then you're onto a good thing for actually releasing the film. But other than that, I also like to make films specifically for the Brixton Motion contests. So I think having a contest deadline, forces you to just make a film in like a week, or if it's tech, a day. So I feel like I can procrastinate an awful lot. So being able to enter contests makes it so you can't procrastinate. And then also because if you're entering a contest, then like people will watch the entire playlist. I mean, I'm not like trying to get views of the videos, but I like just the idea, just people being engaged with the community, and watching the films and talking about them. Uh, just the feeling like it actually mattered. So I think to enter contests, it makes it feel like it matters, because like it's more of a community event, and people watch the entire playlist and talk about all the entries. It just feels more lively, I think. So that's why in for the last couple of years, pretty much all of the films I've made have been contest entries, with the exception of a couple of major projects.
Yeah, it's also the thing with like the community thing where you kind of get less engagement because like the community's been growing kind of since then. Uh, so like during the forest fire videos, like when they were coming out pretty frequently and stuff, and like getting tons of views, like a lot of people would have kind of come across brick filming for the first time, I'd say. So then that probably kind of made like it's great that more people would be discovering it, but at the same time, it also affects that kind of feeling of that it is like community that you can share videos with and then get like immediate feedback.
Yeah, but it's just I always felt like when I was young making the older Benny and Lees, and I'd make loads of them in 1 year. Um, I could post anything, like they'd just be a minute long or 2 minutes long, and the release threads would always be like multiple pages long. And nowadays you're lucky to get like multiple posts in a release thread. I, I always felt like back then, back in like 2008, or at that kind of time period, the release thread felt like sort of sacred in a way. Like you could get a million YouTube comments, but they'd always be nice, cool, lol. Uh, but people would actually post like more insightful things in release threads. on forums. But nowadays, forums are kind of dead, and everyone's moved to Discord, which I'm not opposed to at all. In fact, I much prefer. Um, well, in a way, I prefer community involvement on Discord. There is definitely a couple of things that are lost by it not being on forums anymore, especially being able to preserve the history. It's very. I think it's interesting to be able to go back and read what people were saying years ago, and of course, like everyone has their old embarrassing posts, but that just kind of comes with the territory, I guess. Um, so maybe some people would be happy to see forums die off and go offline so that their old posts wouldn't be online, but I think it's understandable. Um, but yeah, the way people spoke to each other on forums was a lot different to comment sections or Discord chats or any other sort of live chats. And like I remember years ago, just like all day, pretty much refreshing the forum to see if there's any new posts. Which I mean, I guess I kind of basically do the same thing, just sitting on Discord all day. These days, not much has changed.
So then, when people would have posted like all different kinds of brick films and things on the forums, what kind of what would you look for, like that would kind of indicate to you that someone's made a good brick film?
But if we're talking years ago, I mean, when you're really young, it feels like you can just look at everything. Like, I mean, yeah, and also that there wasn't too many films being posted. Like, you'd only get, I don't know how many you get in one day, but it wouldn't be a lot. So, like, especially when you're young and it feels like you've all the time in the world, I just watched literally everything that was posted on the forum because we don't even. It's very hard to remember specifics, but it certainly wouldn't have been a lot of films every single day. I mean, there would have been plenty uploaded to YouTube every day, but not actually posted on the forum. And I guess back then it kind of felt like the people who would actually go out of their way to uh, come to the forum and engage with the community and post their films there, not just post them on YouTube. It was more likely that they'd actually be good, I guess. Even though there were plenty of things over the years that I did miss out on because I wasn't really looking outside of the forum for a long time. So there were good films I missed because they're made by people who just didn't know about the forum or just didn't engage other than just putting this stuff on YouTube. But yeah, back then I basically just watch everything. But nowadays, um, I really more so consider like I want to consider the sort of clever ideas. Um, for a long time, it always felt as if people only cared about technical things. Like it didn't matter how good your ideas were, or if your film was really funny or whatever. People would just say in the thread like, "Oh, you bumped the camera," or "Oh, there's light flicker," and that's about all they'd say sometimes. But I think over the years, people have gotten more into like judging films. I kind of want to say obliquely, like sometimes the contest results can confuse some people because like some film that's like super duper shiny, really uh, high technical qualities doesn't place as high as something that's like shaky and poor animation and whatnot. But like sometimes if a film just has a really good storyline to it that carries throughout the whole film, or if it's just really funny or a really clever idea, um, that often to me is more engaging than a film that's really well done technically, but in, I feel doesn't have as clever of an idea running through it the whole time. So that's what I'd be looking for nowadays, mainly, I guess. I mean, also I can appreciate films that are well made technically, but mainly I like to see sort of novel ideas.
Cool. Yeah. So uh, I noticed that you were a judge of the recent THAC competition. So what was it like to kind of like be behind the scenes and like uh, to be a judge of a large, well, it was a pretty massive amount of entries this year, but
Yes.
But what was it like to judge all the videos?
Yeah, actually, certainly. When I think nobody was expecting this most recent tag to be as big as it was. It was the biggest one ever, with over 100 entries for the first time. So, you know, you know, I guess I'd have to admit that going through the full playlist in a row was like, at times it did kind of feel like a bit of like, oh my god, another entry. But of course, there was loads of good ones. But even over 100 entries, it kind of doesn't matter how many of them are good. At some point, you're going to be like, oh my god, there's so many. But uh, in general, bricks and motion contests, the people involved will have a similar idea of like what they'd be looking for in like how they judge films. So it usually goes pretty smoothly. So I don't know if I'd have much to add there, other than just saying that it's like there's no there's no like behind the scenes drama or anything. You know what I mean? There's not a lot to say. It's just kind of like, yeah, we watch the entries and judge them.
Yeah, cool. Speaking of like bricks in motion, though, I did also notice that you and LOTW Studios' podcast is now the like official bricks in motion podcast. But how did that like how did you come to the decision that you're gonna like make it the official podcast?
Well, really, with the podcast that we do, William is kind of like the one who does everything, whereas I just kind of show up and talk. So the impression that I get, like I'm not really sure, because I'm completely happy with him, like doing all of the sort of uh, additional stuff. So I don't feel the need to be like, if he wants to make a decision with what to do with it. Like I'm not like trying to know the ins and outs of every conversation or whatnot. But I'm pretty sure he was just talking to Chris Wynn, because Chris Wynn became an admin at Bricks Motion, particularly on the side of like community involvement. So he like really made a push to grow the Discord and also grow the contests, which was, both of those were really well done and successful. So I think he was talking with William about making it a like officially, I guess you could say, endorsed by Bricks Motion, because it's not like we didn't want to move the YouTube channel, move it to the Bricks Motion YouTube channel or anything, because I feel like once you build something up in one location, to then move it elsewhere immediately kills it. I've seen that a couple of times in the past. Um, but uh, but with it being considered an official Bricks Motion podcast now, like Bricks Motion will, any social media account of Bricks Motion will share it. I mean, I guess that like theoretically could have shared it in the past, but it wouldn't. It would have seemed a bit random to be just sharing a podcast if it wasn't the actual Bricks Motion podcast. Like if you were to share it every single time on the Bricks Motion social media accounts, it would just be like, why do they keep pushing this podcast? It's just random. But now that it's official Bricks Motion, it makes a lot more sense. And also, Chris Wynn sometimes will help William by editing some of the episodes to put the video clips in along with what people are saying. And I think that having the videos along with that actually match up with the conversations, I think it adds a lot to the viewing experience of the podcast. So yeah, by being an official Bricks and Motion podcast, it was kind of like there was not a big story there. It was just like, hey, do you want to make it official Bricks and Motion? Yeah, sure. And not a great deal has changed about it, which I think is a good thing. But it's just basically beneficial for all involved.
Cool. Yeah. So right. So would you be like recording the episodes more frequently now than you would have before, or like because before it would have been like I've noticed like every few months or so, and
Yeah,
then
I suppose that
yeah.
that is something that I didn't think about there, is that I guess by it being a Official Bricks podcast, there is kind of a bit of an expectation that it'd be a bit more regular. I mean, it's not like super mandated or anything, but that would have been something that was discussed at the time. Like, yeah, hopefully we can make them a bit more frequent than they were previously. Uh, so I know that we've already recorded two. Uh, well, but the two upcoming ones are both Tech Travel 2 crew podcasts. Which, of course, is very easy, since I'm one of the co-hosts of the podcast. It was easy to just organize to get the people who worked on Tech Travel 2 involved and record with them. But of course, the, they make for some like kind of, I don't want to say high profile, but like it's interesting to be having guests on the podcast who were making brick films in the 1980s. It's very unusual. You might think in most cases you'd think that it would be difficult to get somebody like that to do a brick film podcast. But now, since I had worked on the on Tech Trouble 2 with them, they're kind of like back involved, you could say. So it wasn't difficult to just be able to ask and say, yeah, we should talk about this film we made. So I've always liked the idea of the podcast we do. Also, not, it doesn't just talk to people who are like currently active, but also a lot of the guests we have, they were making brick films years ago in the 2000s, and some of them, they're not even really active anymore, but it's a lot of interesting things they have to say anyway. We can talk about their old films, but also talk about what they would be doing now, which a lot of the time, like, people's experience in brick filming directly ties into what they end up doing as an actual career. So I think to a lot of younger people, that hopefully is interesting. It's interesting to hear like how they managed to sort of use what they learned or what they made in brick filming and spin it off into a career elsewhere, either in filmmaking or some other area. But now I'm kind of going on a bit of a tangent, and I've forgotten what the actual original question was.
Uh, um, I was just I was asking about like, have you noticed a difference between like recording the episodes more frequently and kind of spaced apart?
Well, no, I don't think there's much of a. I kind of, I view it as like, if I'm asked to show up and talk, I'll just show up and talk, and everything else just kind of happens without me thinking about it really, because like, because I've been doing like the wiki now I've been making the Brick Films wiki pages for a couple of years. I know a lot off the top of my head, so I don't have to like really do any research or put much thought into recording podcasts. Like, I'm told who the guest is, and I'm like, yep, that's fine. I already know everything pretty much every time. So there's it's no like there's nothing difficult about it. Like, if I'm just asked to show up and talk, then that's what I do. So it doesn't really make a difference to me if it's once a month, twice a month, 3 times, 4 times a month, or once every 2 months or 3 months. It's all just, it's pretty handy, and it's actually, it's really nice, I think, to be able to talk with brick filmers. With an in-depth conversation on a voice call. It's a lot different than talking on Discord. A lot more personal. And even, sometimes there will be calls on Discord, but like very casually with people you already know usually, and you're not going to be going super in depth. You're not going to be like asking like laid out questions. So in a lot of ways, like, you actually get to know people by doing the podcast. So it's nice. Like, it it's not difficult, and like it's interesting to do. And also, like, in Taco Travel 2, there's a lot of guests doing the jury voices and also the crowd voices, and some of those were sourced by, like, if we just so happened to be talking to somebody who I wanted to, if they wanted to have one of their characters as part of the jury, like, if I'm already talking to them on a voice call, I could just say, oh hey, I'm working on this film, and I explain the whole history and concept behind the film, and then say, would you be interested in like providing a couple of lines or interested in one of your characters having a cameo here, and you'll do the voice. So that was rather beneficial in doing the podcast. I mean, I would have asked them anyway, but like to actually have the podcast, oftentimes it helped introduce the concept in a much more natural sort of casual manner.
So then, doing the podcast, like, looking back to like when you would have started and like to this point in time, would you say that you would have like learned more about brick filming and things through like other brick filmers?
Yeah, it would be hard to think of like specific examples, but uh, I mean, I learn a lot from other brick filmers all the time. Like through Discord conversations or people posting behind the scenes on Twitter. Um, so I guess in starting the podcast, I already kind of had a good handle on how other people did things, even if at the time I wasn't doing a lot of that stuff myself. I'd still sort of know the ideas, so it'd be hard to think of. I mean, I'm sure there have been points where people have mentioned some specific concept or little trick or something that I just never thought of. They mention it on the podcast and think, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Why have I never done that before? But I think in general, like sort of learning how to make stuff, you have to be heavily immersed. Like it's not a case of just going to somebody asking, how do I do a thing? And they tell you how to do the thing, and now you know how to do it. You have to pick up, I think, developing like sensibilities rather than just knowing how to make something or knowing a skill is very important. And more so in recent years, especially in starting to make Taco Trouble 2, one thing that I wanted to do was to watch a bunch of real trial films. Uh, and from there, I kind of like expanded my own film watching habits. Um, I think I was kind of like slow to actually watch films properly. Uh, so in making Taco Trouble 2, I wanted to do a lot of research into how to shoot a trial film in a manner that would look kind of serious, because that our intention was for it to, if it looked very serious, it would add to the comedy. Um, so I wasn't, more so nowadays. I'm not taking as much influence from other brick filmers. I want to like immerse myself in real films and consider how they do the cinematography, and especially like set up scenarios in the manners in which the order the shots occur, and how information gets revealed visually. Uh, but it's hard to, you can't just look at something and just say, and it just clicks like, oh, I've suddenly learned all that I need to know, and all that there is to know about this concept, and now I can apply it myself. Like you have to just keep watching, and you develop sensibilities and an understanding over time. I think oftentimes it's I guess you could say semi-conscious. Like I feel like I'm watching films nowadays um differently to how I would have uh, years ago. Like I'm but not even like trying specifically. I'm not like thinking about it while watching to consider all of these things, but in thinking about it, sometimes I guess it kind of just develops over time. Um, and I'm not trying to sound all like big brain over here or anything. I mean it's pretty basic stuff I'm talking about. Like I haven't unlocked the secret of the universe or anything, but like I don't know. I guess previously I didn't watch a lot of films because I wasn't thinking about it so closely, and I guess I kind of thought like, what am I actually getting out of watching films? Like, yeah, okay, I mean, they might be entertaining or whatever, but like, am I actually gaining anything in my life from just sitting around watching stuff? But now the answer is yes. Yes, I am. As far as being able to make my own films better, that's really what played into it.
Right. We were talking before on the podcast about how like taking inspiration from other things than just like other brick filmers will definitely make your own brick films like a lot more unique compared to others that would be drawing inspiration from like other people in the community and stuff.
Yeah, this does come up a decent number of times. Like how sometimes there could be people who come along on the outside, and I mean it's pretty difficult to be an outsider and have a film that people are going to enjoy watching because like obviously if you're ingrained in the community, or if you're just reading a lot of or looking at a lot of what other people do, you're going to pick up on it, on how to make your films like technically a lot better. But yeah, oftentimes outsiders come along with these films that are like out of step with how the community generally make their big films, to the point where they stand out. And it's sort of like what I was talking about earlier, where I really want to see like the strange, the novel ideas in brick films. So a lot of the times outsiders can have, especially if they're a bit older and have more developed sensibilities of at least some level of quality, um they can sometimes come out of the blue with very bizarre films that just especially catch the eye of people who've been around for a long time and have seen a lot. I'm trying to think if there's any. I don't know if there's any good like singular recent examples I can point to, but I mean, actually, the Biff and Mario films and the original Taco Trouble they all fit in there. Um, they're very very bizarre, like compared to the other brick films from the same time period, and even brick films now. Like I'd I'd like to think that Taco Trouble 2 kind of stands out as being kind of in its own world, I guess, like doing things in a kind of unusual way. And obviously, like I'm not an outsider now, but actually, yeah. To return to Taco Trouble 2 for a second, something that I did want to do with it was to make it not look like one of my regular films. Like I didn't want it to feel like, oh, it it's a penta film, but just with somebody else's script. I wanted it to feel like it completely existed, and it's just Taco Trouble 2, if you know what I mean. Like it's not just ripping off how the old films looked, and it's not just coasting along in the grooves of how I make my films anyway. It's it's all been being done with a consideration of just giving it its own sort of visual style. So like the lighting looks different than my previous films, and the animation looks different in how like different characters move on different frame rates, and have like different character to their animation. I mean, I'll probably just keep a lot of that stuff moving forward, but I wanted it to have this sort of like singular feel to it, in that it wasn't just in line with what I'd been doing anyway, or even in line with like other films coming out of brick filming. I mean, it would be pretty difficult for it to be similar to any other films of brick filming with the script that it has. Like, obviously, it's pretty bizarre. In It's not the kind of script that like people would be making, but really now or ever, I'd say the Biff Mario films are really specific. And but anyway, back to the whole the idea of the outsidery kind of brick films. I guess probably a really good example is the Magic Portal. Like the Magic Portal is still really good, um, and obviously there was no community then, and it still has this like sort of strange feel to it, where the sets kind of look weird with all these like beams over the top and stuff with the holes in them, and like you know the manner in which the characters move and express emotion is like enjoyable to watch, and it's not all in the same way that people do it regularly, you know, really in any era of brick filming. So by being an outsidery film, well, I mean, you could only be an outsider brick film at that time, but by being an outsider film, it actually means that it can hold up for a lot longer. I mean, I know the Magic Portal had like an actual budget and whatnot, but yeah, the same would apply for later films like even like Taco Trouble. Like obviously Taco Trouble has like low frame rate animation, but the animation, the poses of the characters and the way they move around is just funny. Uh, and unlike any other big film you'll see. So for that reason, you can still watch it now, and to just watch the characters moving around is still novel because it's not like what people do. So it didn't become super. You could almost say because it originated as being like lower on the technical rung, it couldn't become dated in a weird sort of manner.
Right. Yeah, I really like coming across like professional stop motion animators, like finding like discovering that they can use Lego figures to animate with like for the first time, because like, and also people who wouldn't have come across brick films before that are like getting into it for the first time, because it really shows the difference between like people who are really involved in the community would have like a different kind of style to like outsiders, like you were saying. So it is really cool to see like the different kind of styles and things.
Yeah, and even like obviously now people in brick filming are doing a lot of different styles of animation, but there's something nice about the sort of like if people are new to it or outsiders to it, like the scrappy way that characters move, if that makes any sense. Like if they sort of move like in a sort of funny or jumpy manner, not rigid and not super smooth. Uh, and I often enjoy that in people who well, you know, it's really weird to say because like obviously I like really well done, really animation that has a lot of thought behind it with a lot of good physics and sort of uh, yeah, people who've been practicing for years to with a laser focus on the actual animation itself. But at the same time, I like the kind of messier animation sometimes. I guess it all just depends on how it looks.
I guess that actually reminds me of another question, but how do you feel about like beginner kind of brick filmers and things associating like good equipment with good like quality videos?
We often do say, like you can't just make a better brick film by just throwing money at it. Uh, Certainly, like uh, people are making really good brick films with iPads or with phones. Obviously, you can actually do a lot with webcams as well. Um, so yeah, no, I'd say that you can't. Yeah, you won't magically improve by getting better equipment, better software, or especially not by just increasing your frame rate. That's a big misconception. Like higher frame rate does not equal better animation. The only thing that makes animation better is to animate better. Well, okay, and also having drag and frame and being able to flip back and forth between the frames that helps a lot. So I guess that's the one time where I'll say that uh, buying something will probably more or less instantly make your work better if you have the capability to flip back and forth. But I mean, at the same time, you need to know what you're doing animation wise to be able to determine in flipping back and forth to determine what you should or shouldn't change about the next frame. So yeah, software and hardware, it might help you, but at the same time, you need to be approaching it with like understanding to begin with and practice to begin with. So yeah, if you're starting out, it's yeah, it would be a misconception to think that you can just buy a bunch of stuff and instantly become good. But of course, some people just start out pretty good to begin with. So not trying to say that like newcomers aren't good. Like some of them are actually really good.
Yeah, I've definitely fallen into the the thing of like I need to get this and this and this because that's what like this good brick filmer has used to make their videos. So my videos will be good if I use that as well. But yeah, definitely not the case anyway.
It's kind of funny because like when I started making Taco Trouble 2, I knew I wanted to finally upgrade because I've been making stuff with the Logitech C920 for a long time, and I thought, oh, all the big brick filmers are using a DSLR, and being able to achieve all of these interesting shots with multiple lenses and whatnot. So if I'm going to make Taco Trouble 2, I got to buy a DSLR, and I got to buy Dragon Frame to animate with the DSLR, and I got to buy multiple lenses and filters for the lenses, a split diopter and all these fun things. But then after making the film, I'm looking at the stuff that Forest Fire is doing with the C920, and I'm like, man, I need to go back to that. Like he's getting really cool results that I couldn't do with the DSLR. I couldn't get the camera up this close with the DSLR. Like when I was using the webcam, I didn't even realize what I was like, how good I had it in certain ways. Being able to put the camera directly in the set, and like you could move it with the figures. Like camera movement with a DSLR is incredibly difficult, and also because it's not actually up close to the figures, it doesn't feel the same. Like there's a very specific feeling to a camera following a character when the camera is actually right behind them with a wide lens, it, or like if it's or if the camera's in front of them and it's like the camera is reversing and the figure is walking forward towards the camera. You can't achieve that with if the camera's far away from the figure, or if you're using a zoom lens or whatever. Like, so I mean, in a way, the only way that I managed to pick up on this stuff and like learn the benefits of the webcam was by changing to the DSLR. Like before that, I didn't think about it, so I didn't know what it would be well suited for. Um, but yeah, no, there are ways that you can do a lot with just a webcam or just a, even an iPad or whatever you have. Like, yeah, you can't just instantly spend money and become better. I mean, maybe in some cases it could help, but work with what you have, and think outside the box. Consider how other people have used the equipment that you have. See what they've managed to do with it and how, and in that manner you learn how to make films better than just by buying equipment and hoping for the best.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed the kind of difference that you're talking about as well with the webcam and the DSLR. Like I uh, have been using the DSLR a lot lately, and I'd have it up on like a tripod above the figures and quite far away. So it definitely gives a different kind of feel of like being removed from the video rather than like kind of more immersed than like yeah you can get a lot more immersed with videos that use webcams.
Yeah, like it's kind of it's strange how even if you frame the shot so that you can just see like a close portion of the room, somehow you can still feel how far away the camera is um, from the characters. So I was pretty happy. Obviously, with Taco Trouble 2, I had a pretty big set, and especially later in shooting it, I was using wider and wider lenses. Well, I mean, a lot of my favorite shots were the wider shots. Um, but with Taco Trouble 2, I was pretty happy because I didn't want to move the camera a lot because of the mouth animation. Uh, with the camera moving at 24 frames per second, it would be a hell of a lot more work to have to add the digital mouths for double the frames if the camera was moving in a mouth animation shot. So I knew going into it that there wouldn't be a lot of moving camera shots, and if the camera did move, it would just, a lot of the time it'd be for the shots where the mouths aren't moving. But if I was making a film now, a big project that didn't have digital mouth animation, I certainly would want the camera to be moving more than it has in my previous films. I mean, not to a crazy degree. I think brick filmers maybe have a bit of a tendency to move the camera too much sometimes, and it can be a bit distracting. But I like the sort of the subtle camera movements. You'll see some of that in Taco Trouble too. I liked the idea of it being a bit more like cinematic, sort of like how real films do it, where the camera is often moving in just a subtle manner that you don't notice, but it just seems more engaging. Especially, I like when the cameras follow characters. So in that regard, um, yeah, I certainly want to try to bring the webcam back into rotation, at least like partially. But at the same time, I was very happy with, in making Taco Trouble 2, making these steady shots where the camera doesn't move, but I felt like I put a lot of work into the shot composition and the very specific lighting. You know, it's very difficult. You couldn't get like lighting so incredibly specific if the camera has to move through the set and look at a whole bunch of things. Whereas with Taco Trouble 2, I'd be always setting up the lighting to just highlight the characters, like, or certain parts of the set, like really specifically. So for that reason, and also just for the very specific shot compositions, I was pretty happy with shots where the camera wasn't moving. But I'd like to get into more camera movement, particularly with a webcam in the future, but also using the DSLR for, you know, the shots where the camera isn't moving, or for wide shots, establishing shots. Just more tools in the toolbox, I guess. Couldn't hurt.
Cool, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely cool to see as well how people can mix the DSLRs and webcams and like all the different kinds of tools, like you were saying, and really make it unique that way.
I think so, in the future I plan to get some. I'm going to upgrade my lighting. I think that, you know, sometimes I was always curious. Like, some people seemed to get better results with the C920 than I was, or that most other people were. But the impression that I get now is that the sort of the secret is to have powerful lights and crank down the settings of the webcam, which will result in better quality. Especially if you want to mix and match with DSLR shots. It does kind of, it sounds annoying to have to, I guess, light the shots differently. Like if you're shooting with the webcam, your lighting setup's going to be entirely different than if you're shooting on the same set with a DSLR. So I guess there'd be more work involved, and maybe reasons like that. You know, the impression that I get is, like, let's say Forest Fire's Mandalorian video, that I think that might have been all webcam. I'm not sure, but it's certainly a lot, at least mostly webcam. And I wouldn't be surprised if part of the reasoning behind that is because the lighting would have to drastically change if suddenly you want to do a DSLR shot. At least that's the impression that I get. I haven't tried to make a film with both DSLR and a webcam yet. But yeah, at the moment, if I want to bring the webcam back, my plan is to get more powerful lights. I mean, I got some powerful lights to point through the windows in Taco Trouble 2, but yeah, even in shooting the outdoor shots in Taco Trouble 2, I was kind of feeling like I was hitting the breaking point of my lighting setup, where it was very hard to get light on the sky backdrop and on the set and not have like harsh reflections. I mean, there might be a few harsh reflections in the outdoor shots. Like, I want to get softbox lights for outdoor shots, and now I kind of feel like I'm just rambling about light, but light is important in brick filming. Having good lights that actually have a, if you want to shoot outdoor shots, there's a very specific look to natural light and the way it falls on things. I was trying to emulate natural light in the lighting of Tiger Trouble 2 because the original film has shots that are like actually shot outdoors. So it really has this natural light look. So I wanted to emulate that by buying like super white bulbs and pointing them through the windows of the set so that the light would fall on everything in a very realistic manner. And a major benefit of that is that, well, the lighting is consistent between different shots, but also, previously I'd just have lights pointing down from above, and I'd always be annoyed by if somebody had to wear a hat, the rim of their hat would cast a massive distracting shadow over their face. So if you look at, like, let's say in Tiger Trouble 2, when Dr. X is in the witness box, and there's a nice close up on his face and whatnot, the light is coming in a window to his right, and like the light gets right in under the big wide brim of his enormous hat, and his face is nicely lit up, and it's lit up more on one side than the other because he's closer to the window on that side, and it looks realistic, and the way it falls and fades off as it like sort of rolls across his face, it looks natural. But yeah, by having the sort of motivated lighting, by having the lights coming from the windows and the lights dotted around in the set and whatnot, I didn't have to think about shadows being cast on people's faces if they're wearing a big hat, because the light wasn't coming from above; it's coming from their sides. So, and also I just think it looks nicer. It looks more realistic, more cinematic. So yeah, motivated lighting sources, lights coming through windows. These are things I would recommend.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I myself have one lamp at the moment, so I'll definitely try and experiment with the lighting a bit more going forward. But yeah, is there anything that you'd want to talk about to finish off the podcast?
Well, I guess I should mention that, like, I was only using one lamp for years and years, or maybe two lamps. I kind of would alternate. Like most of the Benny and Lee films would have been shot with either one or two lamps. So like, it took me a long time to get to the point of having much of a setup at all, and I feel like, I still managed to make films that I enjoyed making, and the impression that I get is that people enjoyed watching them. And obviously, if I look back at them now, I can see like things I would like to improve. But like, you know, I guess don't feel bad about not having things or that other people have, and just make stuff and practice. And the time may come where you feel like it's time to upgrade your stuff. Like really, the only reason why I went out of my way to buy a lot of stuff was because I felt like I had something to live up to with Tiger Trouble 2. Like, because I love the original Tiger Trouble, I wanted to make sure that like I put as much into it as much into the sequel as I possibly could to kind of do the original justice in my own mind. So, it's like I'm not sure what I'm talking about anymore. But yeah, I guess just um yeah, don't feel bad about not having things that other people have. The time may come, but for now, like, you just gotta have fun. I guess that's the bottom line.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think that's a good point to end it, anyways. But I'll leave a link to your channel and stuff in the description so people can check it out if they want to.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for having me on. It's been nice to be on a podcast and be able to just ramble about myself. Sometimes I feel like in making the World of Brickfulness podcast, I try to stop myself from dominating the conversation, but by being a featured guest, it's like kind of allowed. I hope.
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty fun and very interesting to talk to you. So thanks for coming on.
Cool. Thanks. Bye.
Hello, thanks for watching or listening, I should say, this far. Um, that's the end of the episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to support the podcast. Link to the Discord server will be in the description if you want to enter the weekly mock contests that I'll be doing. There's a video on my YouTube channel that you're probably watching this on, where I explain how that all works. So yeah, for more information on it, I have another video probably up in the little like information card box thing on YouTube. But if not, if you're watching this on a podcasting app or something, you can just go to my YouTube channel, The Man Enthusiast, and check it out. But yeah, thanks for listening. Don't forget to check out Silly Penta's YouTube channel. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.